And hello, Jeff Miller from ERPA. Thank you for setting aside 45 minutes to join our discussion today, Art of the Possible with PeopleSoft, Innovate with Delivered Functionality. ERPA supports customers throughout their entire lifecycle on PeopleSoft. Our flexible engagement model and cost-effective approach benefits PeopleSoft customers with managed services, modernizing to the cloud, fluid implementation, path to SaaS, and really much more. Nearly anything is possible, which is why today is all about the art of the possible with PeopleSoft. A couple of housekeeping matters. All of your microphones have been muted for this session. The chat is available for you to engage with us. We will be monitoring the chat for any questions or discussions that you would type in there. Following today's discussion, a very brief survey will hit your inbox, and we'd be ever grateful if you would take 45 seconds to complete it for us. And then finally, links to the recording and the slide deck will be emailed to you in a few business days for you to review the content or to send it to someone else that you think might benefit from it. What's on the agenda today? Here is my real quick 4-bulleted agenda slide. Introductions, first of all, from our world-class presenters, and then Robbie is going to tell us a little bit more about ERPA, and then walk us through this whole art of the possible concept before Jessica then will take over and give us a careful demonstration so that you can see some of the possibilities that are out there. World-class presenters they are. We have Jessica Ewald and Dr. Robbie Delore, and I'm going to invite them to make sure they're unmuted and introduce themselves for you, our special guests. So we'll begin with you, Jessica. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you. So Jessica Ewald, I have been working with PeopleSoft since 2001. I don't feel like I'm old enough to say that, but since version 7.6, so it is really the only software that I've known. I live in it, breathe it. And so one of my favorite things that I love to do is just empower users so that you can use the system that you have and use it to its fullest functionality. And I have been blessed to actually been working with Robbie since 2004. So this is just one of my favorite things that I get to do. And we're going to save some time and back to you, Jeff. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Robbie, would you unmute yourself, please, and then tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Robbie Delore. I've been in higher ed for about 38 years here, both as a user and as a consultant. And so I've been working with this product since it was a beta. So I've seen it grow, I've seen how it evolves, and it's a really very exciting thing to know and watch how products can move forward and provide you with new functionality and new tools to do your jobs. I love the fact that I take it upon myself to learn something new every day because this product is vast and it has tremendous capabilities. So I'm very happy to be here with you today.
Great. Thank you, Robbie. Now, you're going to tell us a little bit about ERPA, and then you're going to transition to talk a little bit about this art of the possible concept. So if you wouldn't mind, share with us a little bit more about ERPA.
I will. I'm not going to go into great detail here because you'll have access to this when you get the presentation. But ERPA has been around since 1999. We have a wealth of very, very experienced consultants in all of the different pillars. So the finance, the HR, the student side, both functional and technical. So it's a really wonderful organization that has great depth to help you through and understanding how you can leverage your systems. Some of our awards and affiliations are there. But on the next slide, I'm just going to give you a few examples of some of the clients that we have worked with. And you'll see that they're in various different entities, state and local, federal government, commercial and nonprofit, and then the higher education and K-12. So these are just some of the organizations that we've worked with. We've worked with a multitude of them. Let's talk just a little bit about this, what is it, and kind of how does it work? And what we're trying to present here is the marriage of what happens between IT and what happens between the business. I mean, you have a lot of different products that do things, but it's really about streamlining your operations and controlling how much things cost, how much effort go into various things, enhancing the user experience, not only in this example from a staff member, but to a constituent that you're serving, and then just teaching your organization and helping you become just a little bit more agile in how you do things. I'm going to talk just a little bit here about what is the art of the possible. The art of the possible is really more of a focus on your business process and not necessarily just the product functionality, because there are features within that that allow you to do things. Uh, it's based on what is it you need to do, what are the requirements, and then how do we give you a roadmap to achieve even more leveraging this tool that you have. So that's the kind of things that we go through when we talk about the art of the possible. Several outcomes come from that, and we'll talk about outcomes more towards the end of the presentation. To get to the right place, there's a lot of things that we do. So some of our activities really focus on, walking through some of the processes, asking you questions, helping you understand what that functionality is and some nuances about it. We take you through processes, not just configuration, but processes. How do you do things? Why do you do them that way? Where do they go? What are some pain points that you might have? And then we can determine if it's a process related thing or if it's how you're leveraging some of the tools that you have available to you. At the end, we come up with an action plan, and that's going to be more about what can you do, what are the ways that you can do that, and how can we help you get there. So there's a roadmap and a path forward. What is possible? It's really one of those, if you can imagine it, it's more than likely possible out of a system, whether it's the student system, an HR system, or a finance system. It's how do you automate processes? How do you put the pieces together? Because by doing automation, then you relieve some of that manual effort that staff members tend to be bogged down with. Improving some of the reporting and the analytics that you do, the way that you configure systems and the way that you utilize them in business processes, how can that be improved and give you a more solid assessment of where you're coming from? Enhancing the student or the user's experience is probably one of the most important elements of it, because if you're doing things and you can make it a better experience for them, they're more than likely to return and do additional business. Or if it's a staff member, then they're not going to be encumbered by how difficult it is or how many clicks they may have to make. Overall, this is about improving your efficiency and making you feel better about your outcomes. I'm going to turn it over to Jessica here and let her give you just one of our examples. Today we're going to focus on the course catalog, but this applies to any of the pillars, any of the products. So don't want you to feel like this is the only way, but this is just an example of how we approach getting into what is possible.
Thank you, Robbie. So I picked course catalog when it said of all the things within campus. Why did I pick course catalog? Because hopefully most within campus solutions, most people can relate to the course catalog, and it does touch most modules. So we're going to stop here on the search page. Typically when we look at search pages, we just blow through it. But when I look at a search page, I look at it a little differently when we go through the art of the possible. When we do art of the possible, it's a conversation. So that's what makes this webinar just a little tricky, because I don't get to hear your feedback. So I'm going to talk through just some of what I've had those experiences, what typical responses are like, and we're going to just go through that example. So I hope you can bear with me on this and kind of go through it with me. So when we look at the course catalog, just in that search, in this example that I pulled out, there's only 16 courses, if I see that number tiny well enough. But when we look at the anthropology courses, this is the full list of what this institution has built for anthropology. And I question, when we bring in transfer credit, and that transfer credit gets articulated, if there's not a one-to-one, because some institutions, every institution is unique in the course offerings that they have. We have some general, the cultural anthropology often is consistent, but sometimes we have those one-off classes. And when there's no one-to-one articulation, how is that course getting articulated? Is it going into a general credit. And that's okay when we look at the credit that the student is getting. But when we look at more specifically academic advising, if the student is within that major and they can get that credit to use towards graduation, wouldn't we want it to be at least underneath that subject area of anthropology? And does it matter if it's a 100 level or a 200 level? So just looking here on the search page gives me that information a little bit about how can we make your transfer credit processing better for you and the students for degree audits, maybe prerequisite checking even, that you need a 100 level anthropology course to get into a 300 level. So again, that might be helpful too when we look at prerequisite checking and enrollment for that transfer credit. The other thing that I look at on here, and sometimes we can see it, is when we have those double lines. If you're familiar with the search functionality, since we can search on the subject or the catalog or the description, if there was a change, you're going to see that in the list below. And so they did have a change in a title, but they did not change. So that is the second and the third one, where it was intro into anthropology and then intro in anthropology. And what this tells me just from the search page is that they did an effective dated change. So when we look at the efficiency use of the course catalog, they didn't create a new course ID. So that has positive, the way I look at it is a positive impact within degree audits and prerequisite checking, that they kept the course ID the same. But if they had changed the course ID because of the change of the title, the question I would have next is, did the content of the course change? And so that way it's not considered equivalent. But if it is considered equivalent, now we have those equivalencies we need to build into prerequisite checking and degree audits and build that equivalency table. So a lot that I can just initially tell and have conversations here on that simple search page. So what we're going to do is we're going to move in now and we're going to select cultural anthropology and take a look at the course catalog data. I apologize for the small screen, but what I want to do is just rest here in the catalog data page. A lot of data here within just this first tab. And as Ravi says, we're going through that business process. So it's not just a fit gap of the title is in here, the course description is in here, check, check. What we're going to say is, as I mentioned earlier with the effective dates, how are you using the effective dates? When you have a brand new course coming in, are you using a foundation date of 1/1/1901? Or are you using just that base effective date that goes into the course catalog? So if it's going to be for the fall of 2024, are you using today's date? Are you using an 8/1 of 2024? Because we need to look at that effective date. We know that it has to be on or before the term start. But again, right, I know I feel like I'm really focused in on academic advising today, but when we look at course lists within academic advising, if anyone here has done academic advising, we know that that effective date, if those don't line up, you're not going to pull that course in unless you now add another effective date to your course list within advising. So when we look at the effective dates, now we're focusing on catalog data, but this also goes into all of your foundation records, your programs, your plans, your grading basis. When we look at how are you using your effective dates within the system as a whole, because that can make your processes a little bit simpler, or it can make them a little more complex, because now what we have here in your catalog is, if we're not doing a foundation row, now within academic advising, it's forcing us to do another effective date so that they can see each other. So we're going to have those conversations, and for here in the catalog, we'll have the conversation about the effective dates. How is that working for your institution? Can we make it better? And then when the course is no longer offered, How are you inactivating the course in the catalog? And how is that impacting your business process? When you are pushing your catalog out to the students so they can see your course offerings, are you looking at the effective date status? Are we looking at the second tab? We're not going to go there yet, but we'll look there in just a little bit. How are you using this data for new courses, when you're updating the course, a new effective date, or when you're no longer offering it? If you've been in PeopleSoft, you know there's that little beautiful correct history down at the bottom. I like to call it change. You're changing history. Sometimes we go in and we're like, oh, we just need to change this or correct it. We want to be cautious of, are we changing history in your system, or are we actually needing to do a new effective date change? So I'm talking a lot about system functionality, and you're thinking we're talking about catalog, right? But as Robbie said, this is a whole system process, and we are focusing on catalog. But what we do here and how we have the mindset within the catalog, it tells me a lot about the mindset when we look at the other functionality within your system. So we're looking at how it's maintained, how we're using effective dates. And then the other bullet points that I have in here are just to kind of give us other things to talk about. When we do Art of the Possible, we're looking at everything. And I will take more than 30 minutes on just catalog, but I am forced into just doing some high points here. So when we look at the course units, we have a minimum, a maximum, we have progress units, financial aid units. PeopleSoft likes to break things down into the smallest pieces possible to give you the most flexibility within the system. In the catalog, I usually see this more in like the music classes and art classes, where students can choose to take the class for 1 unit or 2 units or 3 units, or the department only wants to offer it for 2 units in the spring, and the next fall they're going to offer it for 1 unit. Well, you have that flexibility here with your minimum and your maximum units. And we need to look at the catalog as a default. The data in your catalog is going to default down to the schedule. So are you truly using your catalog as that default? Meaning you can use a minimum units of 1 and a maximum of 5. So when you go to default schedule it, at that point you can say, student's going to choose between 1 or 5 units, or we are only offering it for 2 units. If you're not familiar with that, that's in your class association table, and you can go take a look there. That's where you can set that up. Also, financial aid units. I often see this more in our graduate coursework, as well as with the academic progress units. Oh, financial aid, I like to call them remedial courses. These are courses that are not college level, that we can change that financial aid progress units to 0. Student will still get progress units to say that they are full-time. But when we send that enrollment over to financial aid, it doesn't count. And so financial aid doesn't have to do anything special to remove that credit. So again, using the system to work for you so that you can have more efficient processing, and you're not trying to just clean things up because you weren't aware of, you had that possibility here within this page. And then we're going to look at the grading. The grading often, I think, gets overlooked a lot. If we have anybody on the calls that is focused on catalog today, I wish I could change one little thing about this, because if we're looking at this page, that grading, when you pull that list down, it shows you every available grading basis that's in your translate table, not what you have configured. So when we think about how our grading basis is configured, it's configured by career, but we haven't put a career in here yet, and the system is asking us to say the grading basis. So that's something that we need to be cautious of. The default is always going to be graded, but you have the ability within here to create what we often call as a student option grading basis, that when a student goes to register, they can select, I want to take this pass fail, or I want to take it graded. You can give them the option to say, I want to audit, but typically business practices with audits, we want a little bit more information from the student than letting them just select that at the registration. So we're going to have a conversation about what courses do you offer pass fail? Do you have a pass fail grading basis set up? Or do you have a pass fail added into that grade of pass, that grade into your graded grade basis? So even though we're not looking at your grading basis setup, we can have this conversation here to say, can we set that default up for you so that when students go to register, they have those options there. We're not having to backtrack and change things on their enrollment. And then same thing with if it's a pass fail versus graded, do you have that set up here in your catalog so that we don't have to change things at the schedule level? Again, that's on your class association record that you can make changes to that grading basis. This is the default value that's going to go down to the schedule, and you can make changes there. But it also, when you use a student option, students can then select it when they register. All right, moving down the page, repeats. How are repeats working for you at your institution? Are they working well? Are they not working well? How do you have this set up? When we have, and this kind of ties in, and I should put my bullets together, I apologize, with the topics. Often what I'll find is if an institution is using topics, sometimes how the repeats are set up might be not jiving correctly. Or we have additional courses built because we're not comfortable with the topics. We can build topics in the system, and then when we use that repeat for credit, we have a repeat also down there within our topics so that you don't have to go in and clean up your repeat rules and how it's assigned. So when we're looking at how the repeat process is run at the end of the term, if you're having any cleanup necessary things, we want to look at how is your foundation set up here in your catalog to say, are we truly counting the number of courses? Are we looking at the units? Are we looking at the combination of both? The system is always going to look at the lowest one that it met first, right? So is it going to meet the completions first or the units? That's what it's going to look at, and that's what's going to stop the credit and it's going to then invoke those repeat codes. Also, the allow multiple enrollment in a term. That's where I really like that topics, that you can allow the multiple enrollment in a term so that if they want to take 2 topic courses, they can. Often I'll see that more in a music sense than like literature, because literature can have many topics, but students don't usually want 2 literature courses. But your music students will want, I'm going to take voice and I'm going to take piano. And so if the course is music lessons, you can have 2 topics. They can enroll in both of those course IDs. But now when we're looking at repeats, we can repeat by topic, we can look at the course ID. But when we look at an overall maintenance, we only have 1 course ID to maintain. So again, we're looking at efficiency use on that. And then the course attributes. How are you using course attributes? Course attributes to me are the student groups of catalog. We can make as many as we want. We can use them for reporting. We can pull them with degree audit. And we can display to students. They can use that in your delivered class search. I want a course that has the attribute of. Course attributes can print on the transcript. So how are you using the course attributes? Did you go in blazing guns and create 200? How is that working for you? Is it too much for you to manage? Do we need to scale that back? Or were you very cautious and you have 2? And we can make that a little bit more robust for you. And using your course attributes, can we utilize that and make the class search functionality a better experience for the student because we now have attributes that they can search on within the system? Okay, so on the catalog data, so right, still many fields that I didn't touch upon, but these are some areas where I have had experience with other institutions that when we just take a look at these, we can improve the business process, we can improve the student experience, and actually take a load off of administrative staff and personnel that they don't have to do cleanup and they don't have to do manual effort because we've now set that foundation a little stronger. So we still have more data in the catalog. So now we're going to go look at the offerings tab. So within the offerings tab is where we say catalog number, catalog number, and the subject. But what the area I want to focus on first is that course approved. When I was talking about the catalog data, we were looking at when you have a new course that you are building or that you are updating or you are discontinuing, this course approval box area kind of to me goes hand in hand. That we have courses that are approved, they're denied, they're pending. And then also we have allow the course to be scheduled. So when I was talking about at the very, very beginning about transfer credit courses, that might have made some people get really nervous because they don't want somebody to accidentally schedule a transfer course that's used for articulation purposes only. Well, we have that little checkbox over here that we can build a course and just say, but you can't schedule it. Oh, and by the way, if you are using the data here to display to the student, you don't have to put it into the catalog as well. So you can build these courses that are more for internal use. And when I'm looking at the internal use, it's going to be mostly transfer credit or test credit. We have work-life credit too, right? All 3 of those lumped into transfer credit. So how are you using this data? When I talked about that foundation record, you can say, well, that sounds great, but the course really truly isn't active until fall of 2024. So 8/1/2024. So putting a foundation row makes me uncomfortable, right? We have to have these conversations because sometimes you're unsure, you're uncomfortable, and that limits what you have been doing in the system. So we have these conversations. What makes you uncomfortable? How can we assure you that this is how the system is designed, this is how it works? That when we can uncheck that scheduled box, we can have an active class that can't be scheduled, that can't be viewed in the catalog, but it can be pulled by other processes that we now don't have to make another effective dated row change on there. We also look at, and I'm keeping the watch on my time here. All right, so bear with me if I'm rushing through this. I want to make sure we get through it all. The academic structure. So again, we're focused on course catalog, but the structure is pulled in. How are you using your academic group? How are you using your academic orgs? When people go into PeopleSoft, there are many institutions that have been on the system for many, many years. And the initial recommendation 15 years ago that this is how you need to do your structure, well, over time we've learned that seemed to be a good best practice, but now there's better ways of using the system. How does the academic org impact your cybersecurity? Now you have to maintain it. So have you kind of limited yourself in what was best practice 20 years ago? But now let's take that opportunity to step back and say, hey, if we do it just a little differently within our academic structure, does that free us up and give us much more flexibility in the system? So we'll talk about the academic structure on there. The course typically offered, that one just gets overlooked a little bit because we're uncomfortable saying telling the student we typically offer it in the spring, but what if we don't offer it in the spring because it's only one instructor who teaches it? Well, it says typical, right? This is typically, but what that typically offered does is it helps students plan. Students are wanting and needing to plan out more than just one term at a time. They want to plan out at least 2 years or their full 4 years at the institution. So why not give them the tools to help them ideally plan out? And using that course typically offered allows you to do that. You might think typically offered fall, spring, summer. I have seen institutions say typically every third year in the fall, or the even years, the odd years. You define the values that go behind here that fits your institution the best. So let's take a look at that and say, how can we populate this to assist students in their degree planning? Okay. All right, dynamic dates. Dynamic dates have been around for a bit. When we look at scheduling classes, do you have static? Typically, we have your regular session. That's your 16-week long session. And then maybe you break it down into 8-week 1, 8-week 2. That is very standard, very typical. But as our student population has changed, and we now have cohorts and we have different programs that this one starts 2 weeks into the term, we have late starts, or we have a cohort that every 6 weeks a new class is going to start. Using the dynamic date functionality gives the institution the ability to be flexible with that as well, that you're not having to take these, like sometimes they call them ad hoc, but that sounds too flexible. But you're taking these courses that don't fit your static calendar, but if you're not using dynamic dating, you're forced into having these rigid rules that you're having to always update and go back dating and bending. Dynamic date, that is there for you to give you that flexibility that says, oh, the class starts on Tuesday, your drop date is Thursday. Oh, but it starts on Friday, your drop date is on Monday. So if you have that need and you're not using dynamic dates, and again, catalog is your foundation. This is going to roll down. This is a rule that will roll down to your schedule. We'll talk about prereqs and co-reqs. And how are you using them? How are they working for you? Are you utilizing milestones and student groups so that even if it's not a true course prerequisite, often we have a GPA prerequisite or an academic plan, or you had to complete a milestone. Are you using that functionality to its fullest to minimize the number of prereq overrides that administrators are having to do? The less overrides, the more a student can be self-sufficient. So we want to build your prereqs and co-reqs to give students that self-efficiency on registration. And then again, how are you using your taxonomy that's delivered? But again, is that something that we can improve for reporting? All right, next slide we're going to go to is the components. And on here, I'm watching my time and rushing through. When we have the components, typically we think lecture, lab. PeopleSoft delivers this in a translate value, but you can create components that work for your institution. And one of the ones that I have always seen institutions needing to build is a lecture lab. It's a course that Monday, Tuesday meets in a lecture room, Friday it meets in a lab. But we don't need to build 2 components that the student registers Monday and Wednesday, section A, Friday, section B for the lab, that we can build components that work for your institution for reporting needs, for registration and scheduling needs. How are you using that? How are the components making scheduling easier? How is it making your scheduling and your registration more difficult? Are you using your default hours? So instructor contact hours. Instructor workloading within the system, maybe love, hate on that. But I have found even if it doesn't meet your full needs within the system, at least use a little bit of it, because you can putting in your contact hours and running your instructor workload is going to give you some data, some analysis. It's not going to show you their office hours, but you can use that, and we'll have that conversation to say, hey, would it be beneficial to implement the instructor workloading functionality? There is additional functionality that you can use. PeopleSoft will default that data for you on the schedule, but then you can add in that additional information. And from that, can we create contracts, right? Can we create communications to the instructor that says, here is your workload for the semester? If the data is in the system, we can pull it out, right? And as Robbie had says, if you can imagine it, PeopleSoft, pretty much, we can build it, we can use it, we have that capability. And I have found instructor workload as being one of those areas that often we kind of close off to because it just seemed clunky or junky or missing. But really, the data that's there, we just didn't know. Set your foundation. Here's where it is. You can update it in the schedule, run the process, take a look at it, and then look and see what's missing and what you need to add to it to make it work for your system. So those are your hours, your contact hours, your workload hours, OEE, open entry, open exit hours, if you have any of those classes. What we're going to do is we're going to jump over to the fees. So there's that little add fee button that I always see sometimes can get overlooked. So when we look at the fees on here, so the add fee, if we go to that button, it's the next slide. There it goes. Thank you. All right, so the add fee, when we look at, we have tuition calc. Traditional students will have a tuition structure, but then sometimes we have a fee, a lab fee. How are those getting applied? So that's in your traditional sense. And then you have your non-traditional courses. Maybe you have continuing education courses in your system, and each course has a different cost to it. So those courses don't fit into your traditional tuition calc structure because it's not per hour. It's actually, this course is $250. This course is $50. This one is $75. So we have two different ways that we can do that in the system. Probably more than that, but I'm going to focus on the two here, is the catalog fee. And this is for every class section that is scheduled will have that same fee. You have the class section fee, that's the second one, where you can say section A, the fee is $250, section B, the fee is $150. You have that flexibility. You can also, what we call is in the student financials, they create a course list that says all of these course IDs, they all get the same fee of $250. That might be a more efficient way to build it. But again, and the reason I'd like to pull this one in here is that this is not a student records page to me, right? When we are student records focused course catalog and we come in here, this one not so bad because it's the term and the session. We can do that. But then when we click on that second tab and we look at the sub fee tab from student records, I have no clue, right? I don't know as a student records person, what is the account type structure built, right? And this is where when we say that this is not silos, right? This is across the modules where we have to have that conversation with those others in the institution. So we have to have that conversation with student financials to say, what do you want me to put in here? What account type am I using? But when we have those conversations, and that's the other thing that I love about Art of the Possible, is that we're connecting across the different modules. And so we have this conversation about fees, not just records, not just financials. We have that conversation across the modules to say, how can we make this better work? Because this page is not records, right? We don't want records people going in there and mucking up with the account type. But then again, when we go back and we look at that component tab, we have to think we got to it from the catalog and records. We don't want financial people coming in here and mucking up with our catalog. So how are we going to make this work across the modules to make it more efficient? And I am getting close to my crunch time. So we see the course class fees. We'll talk about the attendance module, which, by the way, it's a little cumbersome within PeopleSoft, but we have made the attendance tracking work. And if that's a need, that is a possibility. Again, PeopleSoft gives you every possible thing. Attendance can feel that way, but we can make that work for you, as well as the instruction mode. Room characteristics, I like to talk about it because it's there for your need. It doesn't do anything, but again, if it's helpful to have. So that is it with the catalog. We're not looking at GL interface. So then on the next slides, which you can take a look at, this is hopefully you can relate to say, I would love to have more of this conversation. So this is just some quotes from other clients when I have worked with them that I just like to put in there and say, hopefully you can relate to it. Thank you, Jeff.
Robbie, hey, I think you're up for this slide. If you would unmute yourself and tell us a little bit more about outcomes. Thanks.
So as we go through this process, what happens is that we create a tremendous amount of documentation for you so that you can see what we've explored with you and some of the recommendations we have that will help you transform and improve your processes there. So there's a lot of documentation that comes out, but we know that out from these exercises, you may not understand what all of that means, because it might be functionality you didn't know existed. It might be something that you're not using to its fullest extent. So we support you through that process, and we do a review with you to make sure that you understand what it is that we're talking about and how you can leverage that moving forward. We also help you come up with a timeline. And the reason that that is important is that you don't want to have one thing before another one when they're very much dependent upon each other to move forward. The ultimate goal here is to help you leverage this PeopleSoft toolbox that you have and achieve some tremendous outcomes and improve the way that you do things and gain some efficiencies and improve the user's experience. And again, we are your biggest cheerleaders because we have such experience in this. We want to make sure that you understand what you can possibly do and how we can help you get there. That's the art of the possible.
Awesome. Thank you, Robbie, for that summary and the outcomes. And thank you, Jessica, for the great demo. And you were worried that we couldn't do this in 45 minutes. You did a great job. It felt a little rushed. And I know when you sit down with customers, you take so much care and whatever time is needed, and you don't rush through anything. And we thank you for that as well. Thank you to all of you who joined us today. We hope you found this discussion helpful. Again, as a reminder, you'll receive an email in a few business days with links to the recording and the slides. You'll also receive an email survey right after the conclusion of this webinar. And again, we'd be ever grateful if you took a moment to answer a few of those questions for us. On this slide that you're looking at now, you can see how to follow us on LinkedIn and get a hold of us through our website. And that's it for now. Again, thank you to our world-class presenters and what a great job they did and the helpful information they shared with all of us today. We look forward to sharing more information in future webinars on a variety of topics of interest to those who use and love PeopleSoft. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thank you.